Welcome to the Coherent Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Jemima House. Today, we are going to talk about profit is not the opposite of purpose. Extraction is. I'm very excited to bring this episode to you. 3 things that we're going to look at. The first thing is a fear that lives inside values-led businesses that very rarely gets named. And as we all know, when you name something, you give it power. Secondly, tracing where that fear came from and why it made sense at the time. And thirdly, looking at the structural alternative that makes the either-or choice unnecessary. So let's get into it. First of all, there is something that lives inside the ethical founder space that doesn't very often get examined. And I know because I've been working in this space for many years, and it's true all the way from solopreneurs up to big business. So this fear is embedded inside something that looks like deeply held value, or maybe people call it integrity. And specifically, it's the fear of becoming something that they don't want to have anything to do with. If you've built a business around genuine values, and if the reason that you started it was rooted in a deep desire to do things differently, to prove that it was possible to create something that served people rather than took from them, then you've almost certainly watched other businesses make the slide. And when I say slide, I mean starting off really well and then sliding into being driven by profit, being absolutely beholden to performance first instead of people first. And it's something that you can see. You don't have to look very far to find businesses that have shifted from the thing that they said they were to the thing that the market rewards them for being. And you, as an ethical founder, decided that you wouldn't do that, which is amazing. You would hold the line. And that staying true to what you built mattered more than scaling it into something that you didn't recognize. I get it, because that decision comes from integrity. And I have felt the same way in the past. But I also want to look at what that decision was based on, because underneath it, there's a binary that I think is worth looking at. It's the idea that profit and purpose live in 2 different places, and that growth is inherently a massive risk to your values. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So the pursuit of serious revenue doesn't have to be the first step on a slippery slope that ends somewhere that you don't want to be. And that binary is the thing that I want to sit with today. So where does it come from? Well, it's not irrational. Obviously, it comes from somewhere. It's intelligent. And it comes from a kind of measuring of the evidence that we see around us. And lots of values-led founders have spent years subconsciously taking in this evidence. Because for around about 5,000 years, human societies have been organised around a pyramid structure. Resource concentrated at the top, human costs distributed downwards. And then we had the Industrial Revolution, like 200 years ago or so. Capitalism took that architecture, ran with it, scaled it really efficiently, and then profit became king inside that system. And profit there did mean extraction. It did mean the systematic removal of more value from people than was ever returned to them. So of course you don't want to move towards that. It did mean that accumulation at the top required depletion below. And it's absolutely natural that seems abhorrent to people who are values-led, to people who run with kindness as their driving force. That is just something that is alien to us. But I think what happened is that two things got fused together, which can sometimes happen. There's this kind of false correlation. And in this case, profit and extraction became synonymous. Not consciously, and not as a stated belief, like you would never say that that's what you believe, but it felt like it was just true because it was embedded in your consciousness. And it was deep enough so that you began to operate with this as an invisible constraint on what felt possible for you. But maybe more importantly, what it felt safe to want. And the thinking that took hold there was essentially Cartesian thinking, which I've talked about a lot over the years. You know, it's the either or. And I think of it now as like a lazy way of thinking, because you do have to employ a little bit more energy to understand nuance, to hold that more than one thing can be true at the same time. And in this case, it does not have to be profit or purpose, scale or integrity. Just because that is how success gets measured in the wider world, you don't have to trade your integrity for your impact. And it's felt impossible for a long time because the pyramid is just so ubiquitous and so powerful. But what happened inside that binary was that people who are running, I used to call it heart-led business, ethical founders, however you want to describe it, these people have made something on the basis of helping other people. They didn't compromise. Sometimes they did it to their own detriment. And then they hit a ceiling. So whether that was in the case of, you know, the obvious trope, the solopreneur who gives too much from an empty cup, or whether it is the ethical founder who's actually running a multi-million-pound business, and they just hit a ceiling and they're just like, actually, I don't know how to go forward in a way that is not extractive, but that creates more impact. Because there's only been one map up until now. And the map for scaling was the map of the pyramid. More hierarchy, more control, more of the leader personally absorbing the pressure that the structure won't hold. And in the refusal to follow it, impact has been limited. And then because we live inside a culture that has spent centuries privatising structural problems and returning them to individuals as personal ones, what do we start to see? Well-being patches, more mindfulness, more resilience, more stress management, when it's not the responsibility of the individual. It's an architectural problem. It's an architecture that's not fit for purpose-led business. So here's the reframe. Here's what I'm proposing. And it's offered as a genuine structural alternative to the either or and to the pyramid vertical system. Profit isn't extraction. Extraction is what the pyramid does with profit. Those are not the same thing. And treating them as such is costing values-led founders something they cannot afford to keep losing. In an extractive system, profit flows upward and human cost flows downward. So one person's accumulation requires another person's depletion, and that is the basic architecture of the pyramid. However, in a circular system, profit is something categorically different. It's the evidence that the structure is functioning with coherence. It's the natural consequence of genuine alignment between the central intention, the people working towards it, and the value being created for those that it serves. So it doesn't extract from people, it emerges from the coherence between them. Coherence, alignment, they're kind of interchangeable. You can't serve people sustainably from a position of lack. You just can't do it. Now, that's not a radical statement, it's just maths. The business that can't sustain itself can't serve anybody for very long. And the founder who has somewhere unconsciously decided that financial struggle is somehow the price of ethical work has not escaped the pyramid's logic. They've internalized it. They've made it personal. They've worn it as a badge of honour, proof of their own seriousness. So purpose and profit are not opposing forces in a coherent system. They're interdependent expressions of the same thing. Take one away and the other one eventually fails. But if you put both inside the right shape, they compound each other. So it's not a softening of your values to do this. It's what your values structurally require in order to be sustainable. The future of business is regenerative. I know that word is becoming really trendy now and widely used, and I want to use it precisely here, not as a trend marker. Regenerative means producing more than it consumes. It means a system that leaves the people, the relationships, the resources and the environment that it touches more vital after contact than before. Just better. It's the structural opposite of extraction. And here is what regenerative business requires. It requires profit. We do live in the world of the 10,000 things. We do need money. We have to have a roof over our head and we need to pay for it. We need food. We need to pay for it. The founders who will build the most important businesses of the next decade are the ones who found the architecture that made the choice between purpose and profit unnecessary. So you were right to refuse the pyramid's map. 100%. The pyramid told you that scaling meant extracting. I am here to tell you that that doesn't have to be true. Profit and purpose do not have to live in opposite places, and you do not have to choose between them. Refusing a map is not the same as having nowhere to go. The architecture exists. A system where the shared intention sits in the middle, where responsibility is distributed rather than concentrated, where the structure carries the weight so the people inside it are freed up to do their most generative work. Can you imagine? Where profit is the natural result of coherence rather than the product of extraction. You were never choosing between your values and your survival. That was never the real choice. It was just what the pyramid needed you to believe, to stay inside that faulty system. The full structural context behind this episode is in the article that I'm going to link in the show notes. And if you feel to locate where the friction lies in your own organisation, there's also a link to the Friction Audit. More next Monday. And I will try and keep it shorter. I keep going over time, 16 minutes. Thank you for listening. See you next time.